Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
Thank you for listening to this St. Louis on the Air podcast brought to you by Lindenwood University's Hammond Institute for Free Enterprise, examining market approaches to help solve economic and social issues, hammond.institute.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. St. Louis author James Rollins just keeps cranking out novels, many of them bestsellers. Rollins grew up in Baldwin and went to Mizzou and its renowned veterinary school. Then he turned to writing. He's now promoting his 34th book and is already working on his 35th. His latest thriller is titled Crucible. It revolves around some ancient witchcraft history and modern technology, specifically AI, artificial intelligence. You may love Siri, but Rollins told me in a recent interview the future of AI can be scary, as he makes very clear in Crucible.
Well, doing the research frightened me. And as a novelist, that's one way I get to sort of work through some of my fears is put it out on paper, try to make sense of it, try to, if I can, craft a happy ending, find some, path through what's coming next. And so, obviously I want to make a roller coaster ride. I want to entertain my readers. I want them turning pages late in the night. But, hopefully at the end, we've read through the what's true, what's not section at the end of my novel where I pull aside the curtain and let you know where everything came from, leaving a few breadcrumbs to follow if you like, that hopefully, you're left with something to think about.
Where are we in this world of artificial intelligence, do you think?
Well, we're right at the cusp of a very scary time in humanity, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book now. I was planning on doing an AI book, but I was waiting for that right story, letting it gel and germinate a little bit, until I started doing some in-depth research, and I began to talk to and accumulate about 24 AI researchers that were willing to talk to me either by phone or by email. And even talking to them, finding out, how unsure and unsettled they are about where AI is headed. Because right now, AI already is deeply integrated in our lives. It's what's called narrow AI, in that it's just a rudimentary form of AI. It's that Siri in your pocket, that's Alexa on your countertop. That's the next stage when we see driving cars are going to be run by AI. But we're talking about the next stage, what's coming next. And that is what's spooking a lot of the AI researchers. And they spooked me enough that my final question to the lot of them was, well, when do you think we're going to cross that threshold where we actually develop an intelligence that's self-aware, that is as intelligent as we are, if not superior in intelligence? And so I did a straw poll among these 24 researchers, and the average was anywhere between 5 years and 15 years from now, which is disconcerting enough because that's, within our lifetime. That's not, far into the future. This isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger going back to save Sarah Connor type of story. This is right from where we're at right now. But two of the researchers told me this. They said, Jim, we believe that we're already there. We've got our ear to the third rail of AI research, and it's rumbling. And it's rumbling in a manner that could only make that sound if somebody was testing a self-aware AI. And they showed me other proof that's in the book, proof that I had changed some names to protect against slander, but it's there, and another proof that was almost beyond my ability to comprehend because it was very technical. But they were convinced that somebody already is testing this. So this isn't future tech. This is just around the corner, if not already here. They believe that people were prepping for an announcement within the next 8 to 12 months. So that's where we're at, and it's going to be a pivotal change in how we view us and the world, because this is the first time we're talking about sharing our planet with an intelligence that's equal, if not superior, to our own.
Well, what form would that take then? I mean, your characters deal through computers in your book. A computer doesn't seem to pose much of a threat.
It doesn't, but these, what we're talking about is the next stage. As the founder of Skype once said, once we get to that stage, we're talking about a being, a creation that is literally beyond control, because it's going to be so powerful. There's not any limitations. We're not going to be able to safely box it up. It's going to have access to spread through the internet and the web, and it's going to be beyond our comprehension. And even now, the AI researchers kept referring to what's called an algorithmic black box. Even these narrow AIs, these rudimentary AIs, these researchers will put in data into this black box, and an answer or inference will come out the other side. But they can't tell you how A led to B. They can't tell you the intellectual or thought process or algorithmic route that AI came to that conclusion. That is it's still a black hole. DARPA, the Defense Department's Research and Development Agency, just spent $6.5 million to Oregon University specifically to try to shine a light in that black box. Or even now, at this rudimentary form, we really don't understand it. And yet still, that's not enough to make people be cautious. Every government is pursuing this. Every country is pursuing this. Stephen Hawking, the physicist, said that when we get to this moment, it's going to mark potentially the end of humanity. Elon Musk says it'll lead to World War III. Vladimir Putin said that whoever controls this tech will control the world. So just as for the sake of our own security, militarily, financially, everybody's after that golden ring, and they're hell-bent towards that goal to the point they're discounting safeguards. And so my next question to a lot of these AI researchers, well, what can we do? What if this is truly where we're heading to, if not already here? How can we protect ourselves? What can we do to avoid that end of humanity that Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking seem to believe is where we're headed? And their answer was, well, we need to construct an AI that is friendly, an AI that is empathetic to us, sympathetic to us, one that has a moral compass. Well, and again, I'm trying to think of a computer. I'm thinking of my iMac at home. I don't believe it has a moral compass. So I said, well, how do you build a moral compass into a computer? And they told me. They said, well, this is what IBM is doing. This is what Google is doing. So there are little corners of this chase towards that golden ring that are pursuing the harder path, the more expensive path, to try to find that path to a friendly AI. And in my book, that's what I use. I introduce a rudimentary AI in this book called Eve. She's very crude at the beginning of the book, and over the course of the book, her young researcher that is trying to sculpt her towards the correct path is using techniques I did not make up. These are techniques I learned from those AI researchers.
Yeah, that's the essence of your book. And given what you've just said, it's the programmer who is going to determine what the AI is going to wind up doing.
We are the gods of this future creation, and the question becomes a matter of nature versus nurture. How much of who we are is our genetic code, and how much of who we are is how we're raised. And the same will come true for this developing AI. How much to build a friendly AI, what do you need to change the code to make them friendly? Well, that's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is how do you raise that AI as it becomes self-aware? It's like raising a child. If you abuse it, you might end up with something nasty. If you raise it in a proper manner, you may end up with somebody that can be our avatar or a champion against that future moment where maybe a malignant AI rises. At least we'll have somebody that can potentially fight that.
We can't give too much detail of your book because that would be
we don't
too
want
much
to ruin
of a spoiler.
anything.
You don't want to ruin anything. But one of the things I would like to point out is the fact that women play really an integral role in this, for good and for bad, and of course Eve being the avatar here. Was that intentional?
It was. The beginning of the book goes back to mysteries, tracing back to the Spanish Inquisition. It'd be hard for me to explain why. So, by the book you'll find out. But back in the past, women that dared to question the natural order of the world, those that were practicing pagan rites of experimenting with herbs and plants to heal. Oftentimes, those in power, usually they're the men in the church at that time, back in the mid-1400s. They didn't like that, so they declared them witches and found a way to eliminate them. And over the course of time, that's not much changed. Even today, we might not be burning witches, but when we have women today that are exploring, questioning the natural world, specifically women scientists, they're still at a disadvantage. They're still, in their own way, persecuted. Between sexism, between lower pay, between their research being denigrated and oftentimes overwritten by a male colleague, it still is a hard path. So if there's one of the goal of writing this book is, to potentially, encourage those young women out there that might, want to pursue the STEM sciences, the STEM fields, is to shine a light on the fact that this is a problem still.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the STEM fields. That's an issue, a separate issue in the sense that in our country today, we talk about it a lot, but not many people are going into the field, not as many as are needed.
Exactly. It's, information is power. And when it comes to the STEM, that's where there's a huge, we're seeing China putting a lot of effort. We're seeing Russia putting a lot of effort into bringing a new generation of scientists and researchers, and we're losing ground. And that is something that is disastrous. It's going to be disastrous for us.
Going back to the artificial intelligence, in your book, you make reference to two types. There's AGI and ASI. What is the difference?
Well, right now, like, as I mentioned, what's in our pockets with Siri is what's called a narrow AI. It's still pretty crude. The next stage when when AI becomes self-aware and is at the level of our intelligence is called artificial general intelligence, is the term AI researchers use. That's when we have an AI as smart as we are. But that AGI, as most AI researchers will admit, won't stay in AGI for very long. It's going to be very busy. It's going to look for ways to improve itself. And in doing so, it's going to become smarter very quickly. Literally, they were saying it could take hours. It could, if worst case scenario, maybe weeks. It will go from an AGI to an ASI. An ASI is an artificial super intelligence, where now we're talking about something that is thinking at speeds that are beyond our comprehension.
Yeah, you used speed terms that I've never heard before in your book, how quickly things move.
It's pretty scary. I mean, I use in the book the example of AlphaGo. Go is an ancient Chinese game. It's literally, and I'm not exaggerating, trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of times harder than chess. And the estimate was that it would take at least a decade for an AI to become powerful enough to beat the human grandmaster at the Chinese game of Go, because it is so complicated. And already back a few years ago, we had an AI that could beat the human grandmaster at chess. We had Watson was able to beat the Jeopardy champion, and then Google's DeepMind program developed an AI called AlphaGo, specifically designed to play that game. And lo and behold, AlphaGo beat the human grandmaster Go a full decade before they thought that was possible. But Google was not satisfied with that result, so they decided to improve AlphaGo, and they created the younger brother of AlphaGo called AlphaGo Zero. In 3 days, they basically just said, okay, AlphaGo Zero, here are the rules of Go. Now go play it for a while, and we'll get back to you. 3 days later, they went back to AlphaGo, and they challenged AlphaGo Zero with the human grandmaster. So in 3 days, this AlphaGo Zero was able to beat the human grandmaster at Go. And then they challenged AlphaGo Zero to challenge its bigger brother, the original version AlphaGo, to play this game. And 100 games out of 100 games, AlphaGo Zero beat its bigger brother. So in 3 days, it became that proficient. And that was a year and a half ago. And one of my AI back pocket researchers works at DeepMind. And they said, we're well past that. So that gives you some indication of how quickly we're accelerating in our AI research.
You hear people from time to time talking about the potential for artificial intelligence to reach a point at which they find we, humans, are useless to them, and they'll just kind of do away with us. Do your researchers talk about that?
And not just useless, but a threat. Is that when this ASI comes onto the field, whether it's now or whether it's in 8 to 12 months from now or 5 to 15 years from now, it's going to be literally immortal. It's a silicon intelligence. As long as it has access to resources and power, it can live forever, can multiply itself. Right now, they even have AIs that are designing other AIs, which to me itself is creepy. Yeah. And it's not going to look at just threats now. It's not going to look at you and I and go, well, are you a threat to me? They're going to look at, are these apes that walk amongst me, are they going to be a problem 10 years from now, a century from now, or even a millennia from now? They're looking at threats way down the pipe because they anticipate being there. And so they're going to sort of judge and extrapolate, when are we going to become competitors for resources? When are we going to maybe try to stop that ASI? And it may set things in motion that are, decades, if not centuries long, to make sure that if that ever arises, it's in the position to be able to get rid of us.
That is scary stuff when you stop to think about it and think that the potential is there.
And it is. I mean, this sounds like a lot of science fiction, but this is worrying AI researchers, and it's a problem that we may all be facing in the very near future.
Yeah. Another fascinating part of your book was the segments dealing with the brain
Yes.
and brain mapping and some of the things the brain could be capable of doing. Among other things, being able to, through the MRI process, extract pictures of what the person in a coma, for instance, is thinking.
And that's not fiction. That is right from Science Today, where they have now, using functional MRIs, ones that are tuned to read the blood flow through a brain in great detail. They're able to look at that map and interpolate and figure out pictures from that. So they're now able to use that and they did that a study at a university where they had students in a room. They studied them looking at different pictures, and then they put them in an MRI and had them think of that picture. And the AI that was interpreting that data was able to then extract exactly what they were picturing. And that's becoming more and more refined. There's a product called Neural Dust that sounds, again, like it's almost something science fiction, but they've already done research with Neural Dust, which is even a finer way of looking at the way the brain ticks and being able to pull information out of that. And they've finished research on rats, and they're now going into human experimentation. So that's everything in that book is factual. It's what's actually going on in different research institutions. And just today I was reading in the news that they've fine-tuned enough that they're able to now expand that to potentially people that can't communicate, being able to hook them up to advice and read their thoughts enough to communicate just via thought.
Wow. That Stephen Hawking's, for instance, that would be an interesting capability where he's still around.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. You're not very far from where you grew up, and
No, I'm not.
Not very far from where you went to school. Tell me something about the evolution from veterinary school and at Mizzou to a best-selling novelist.
Well, it was a different path. I'm still. During my book talks, I always pause and I'll ask, is there any other veterinarians in the audience that want to write and do want to write thrillers? Because I think at this point I'm the only veterinarian that writes thrillers. And a lot of lawyers become novelists, and if that occasional doctor becomes novelist. 'Cause I think mostly they don't like their job. I think veterinarians like their job, and so we don't wander too far astray. But for me, I always wanted to be a vet growing up. From third grade, I got that assignment that you always get in third grade. Go home, write an essay on what you want to be when you grow up. And I remember the third grade version of myself sitting at my dad's white sheet of paper in front of me, ready to fill out that essay. Knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. Only problem, didn't know how to spell it. So I thought I could put fireman, doctor, finish that little few paragraphs and go out and play. But the one thing that third graders hate to do, I actually got the dictionary and looked it up because I was that determined from third grade to be a vet. But that was on one half of my brain, loves animals, loves medicine, loves science. The other half of my brain, a little more twisted, a little weirder. I was raised with 3 brothers and 3 sisters. We were raised Polish, Roman Catholic, and I think to keep the Polish flag in your window, you had to have at least 6 kids. My mom had a spare. But they were my early audience. I loved spinning stories, telling wild stories and tales, and if tears were involved, all the better. And I call it storytelling. My mom called it lying. But that was the other half of my brain, and I kept reading. Throughout my even today, I still read. It's like throwing gasoline on that corner of my brain, and so even though I knew I wanted to be a vet, I kept reading, and that kept that desire to maybe walk into a bookstore one day and see my book on a shelf. And, began writing some short fiction that didn't sell. 4 years I tried to write short fiction. Nothing sold. But based on that great success, I decided to write my first novel. And it got a few rejections, but eventually it sold also. And then one book became another, and eventually here I am.
What, 30 of them now? Is that
34 books.
34 books.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that the essay you wrote in the 3rd grade became a bestseller.
No, but the first day of vet school, the entering class is seated, and the dean walks in and gives an introductory speech to the entering class, and he ends that lecture with the chilling words you probably remember from school too, is, take out a sheet of paper, you're having your first pop quiz. It's a 1-question quiz. If you get it wrong, we're kicking you out of vet school. Write down the word veterinarian. So from 3rd grade, I was ready for that question. Not everybody else was.
We should point out, too, as our time is winding down, but you do bring an animal into Crucible in a supporting role. Kind of cute.
Exactly. At one point I got a question from a fan, and I said, hey, Jim, write about here in your, arc of your books. All of a sudden, all of your main character sort of had animal sidekicks, or animals played a big role in your story. In Amazonia, you had an orphan jaguar cub that played a big role. And here you have a Western mountain gorilla. And this one, there's a search and rescue dog or a military war dog. What's up? Why, prior to that, nobody had pets. Why? And I realized that and this, again, is sort of why writers are a bit naked on the page. I had to go back and think, well, why is that? And I looked back and I realized, oh, that's when I finally gave up writing, because I was still writing while I had my clinic. And so when I finally sort of weaned myself off the clinic and was writing full time was when animals started creeping into my writing, is that one side of my brain began seeping into the other side of the brain because I wasn't getting any type of outlet from working at the clinic on a daily basis.
Do you ever miss that? Do you miss having that kind of a life?
I still do some volunteer work. I haven't given it up totally. I can still neuter a cat in under 30 seconds if need be. I work with a group that traps feral cats in the Sacramento Valley. They bring them to the shelter. I spend one Sunday for 8 hours spaying and neutering them. So now all I do with my veterinary degree is just remove genitalia, but it's a hobby. So I keep my toe in the water.
You mentioned you saw something in the paper that kind of triggered an idea. Do you get a lot of your ideas from the news?
I do. I always got my antenna up, because I'm trying to be as topical as I can so that the story has a little resonance beyond just the roller coaster ride of an adventure. So I'm always looking for, either a historical mystery that might be fun to play with in a novel, or I'm looking for that science that makes me go, what if, where's that headed? Whenever I talk to these scientists, I always want to be as up to the moment as I can, because when I finish a book, oftentimes there's a lag period of months, if not almost a year before the book comes out, and science changes rapidly. So I want to be as current as I can. So whenever I'm talking to these scientists, I'm telling them, don't tell me what you wrote in a paper, 3 months ago. Tell me, look over your shoulder and what's on your lab table or your workspace today, because that's what I need to know if I'm going to put it in the book.
What's the next one?
Next one deals with a mystery and some surprising information about Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. If you were in the 18th century, you would have thought Troy, the city of Troy, was mythological, was legendary, and it wasn't until the 19th century when a young amateur archaeologist discovered the walls of this what appeared to be Troy, and over decades later was proven to be Troy. So this next book, you're going to find out how much else of the Iliad and the Odyssey, the story of gods and monsters, blessings and curses, is actually true.
You like to do that, don't you? To look back at history and then bring it forward.
I do, because I think there's always lessons in history, and so and here we have the lesson of the fact that, in the past, women were being persecuted and they're being persecuted today. In the past, women, witches were not really persecuted by the Catholic faith for the longest period of time. It was only until after the publication of a certain book called the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches, that there's a great pogrom against heretics and witches across Europe. And the only reason that book became an issue and lit that fire was it coincided with the invention of the Gutenberg printing press. If it was after the Bible, one of the first mass-produced books out there, so it was widely distributed, this witch hunter's Bible, and it was considered to be the book that triggered the great burning of witches across Europe and eventually here in Salem. And so here, back in the past, they were, I'm sure when Gutenberg had invented the printing press, everybody was going, oh, it'll be a great boon for humanity. It will bring people closer. Knowledge will be easily spread. And what did we use it for? Burn all witches. And look at the internet. Internet was like, oh, it will be a great boon to humanity. It will bring the world closer. Knowledge will be easily accessible. And look what it's become. And so I'm just extrapolating. Well, everybody, the Ray Kurzweil is one of the gentlemen that sort of invented this idea of the singularity, this moment where we're going to have an AI on our planet. He believes it will be a great boon to humanity. It will bring us closer. Information will be greatly available. But, let's look at history and how sometimes tech is not the boon that we think it might be.
Careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the book. Good luck with it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.